Good evening, everybody. Welcome. You have no idea I am, most of you, which is absolutely fine. I happen to be the lucky person who's co-principal of this fantastic place. Don't ask me why we're hosting it here, apart from Michael asked. Okay, that's the main reason. It's fantastic to be in a school, I have to say, because obviously we know education is front and centre through this election. It's also fantastic from our perspective because I managed to got a group of young people and a teacher at the back there from our citizenship class who are currently studying democracy and electoral processes. And so I'm going to be really, really hopeful that what they're going to see modelled tonight is democracy at its nuanced best rather than its shouty worst. If I can give you that, my plea as a role model to these young people, give you my plea that we keep it as we should do, which is about democracy and a voting process rather than who's the angriest. If we can manage that, I'd be delighted. If there is a fire bell that goes off, my suggestion would be to get out, because there is no planned fire bell to go off, so if it does, we're probably on fire, okay? The front door is there. If the fire is in that way, go out the back door, okay? If you happen to need a cigarette, please feel free to do so somewhere else, if that's okay. Not outside the front of the building, underneath the word Passmores, because that would make me very happy. Just cross the road and do it there. And bathrooms, for those that need bathrooms, you know, go through that door and turn right, or round the back and turn right. They're just through there. You can't miss them. I hope that it's a really interesting night. I'm really looking forward to it. I need to introduce one more person. This is Mike. Now, Mike from behind looks like John Cleese. We've heard. Is that right? He's John Cleese's body double on numerous occasions. But Mike is here to host the evening and make sure it runs smoothly. So I shall now get out of the way and leave it to you, Mike.
Thank you, Vic. I'm actually the poor man's Fiona Bruce, and we don't quite have the BBC's budget, so we've only got 2 microphones. So our candidates are going to share one, and when we come to the questions part, we'll try and move the microphone around the room as quickly as possible. First of all, on behalf of your Harlow, we're delighted to see so many of you here. Thank you so much for coming out on a cold, cold night for this. And what are we all doing here just before Christmas? We'll find out maybe. This is the format of the evening. I'm going to introduce the candidates. They've got 2 minutes each to state their case and why they should attract your vote. And then after that, I've got a list of questions that you've already submitted to your Harlow. And then if there's time after that, then we'll throw the floor open. Okay, we're going to finish about 8:30. I can only echo Vic's words. We'll get more done if there's less interruption. So thank you very much for your patience and welcome along tonight. And we'll start. I haven't told the candidates which of the 3 of them are going to go first. I'm just doing it by my piece of paper here. So I'm going to introduce to you from the Liberal Party, Charlotte Kane.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to repeat the thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. It's great to see lots of people here taking a real interest in what's going to happen on 12th of December. I find Harlow a really, really inspirational place because it shows what can be done when you have political will. After the Second World War, when we were reeling from hundreds of thousands of people being killed and seriously injured, when we were struggling to feed and clothe our population and rationing was still in place, we decided to build a really beautiful new town with lots of good housing, green space, and sculptures. And I think that is really, really inspirational, and it's deeply upsetting that we've lost that political will over the last few decades, and frankly parts of Harlow are suffering because of that. I do have the political will, and the Lib Dems have the political will, and we're going to fight to make things better for this country and for Harlow. Take health, for example. We need to put a great deal more money into the health service because people now are struggling to get an appointment with their GP. If they have to go to hospital, they're on a very long waiting list. This isn't acceptable, but as well as putting more money into it, we would work with the other parties so that we get a cross-party agreement that would mean the health service would have a long-term plan for its funding and could plan for the nurses it needed to recruit and the doctors and be a really good world-class health service again. Housing is a real problem in Harlow, and we see people being asked to live in shabbily converted office blocks. It's shameful, and we need to build much more council housing, and we would build 100,000 new council houses every year, and I would make sure that quite a lot of them were in Harlow where they're desperately needed. And then you look at the big issue of the time, which is our environment and the damage we've been doing and the impact that is going to have on us as the human race and on the planet as a whole. And we're determined to address the environment and make sure that we move over to green energy, electric cars, better public transport, more insulation for houses, so that we protect the planet that we all live on and depend on. And we believe that we can't do these things, we won't have the money and the people and the energy to do them unless we stop Brexit. And so that's why, as a party, we would stop Brexit and move on to these issues that really matter to people. And so in closing, what we want to do as Liberal Democrats for Harlow and for the country as a whole is build a much brighter future for everyone.
Thanks, Charlotte. And next is Robert. Robert, if you just pull the microphone closer to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's good to be here this evening, especially with so many people, and thank you to the two mics and to Vic Goddard for hosting this important hustings. Now, I was born, as some of you know, with cerebral palsy, and I never knew in my early years, because I wasn't able to walk, I was told that I wouldn't be able to do much with my life and actually have a fulfilling existence. My father met an incredible professor at Great Ormond Street Hospital who's changed my life. And I used to go there every week as a child and had a number of operations. And I tell you this story because it taught me two things. One, about the NHS, the umbilical cord between the British people and the National Health Service. And secondly, the importance of service and a desire to serve. And it's one of the reasons, because of my life's experiences as a child, where I did everything I could to make sure that we got a new hospital for Harlow with hundreds of millions of pounds from the government, one of only 6 to begin with in the whole country. I did many debates, many questions, brought the Prime Minister to Princess Alexandra Hospital, because I believe that politicians should keep their word, and I made that pledge at the last election that I would do everything I could to get a new hospital for our town, and we now have that guarantee of that hospital. I also believe that politicians should keep their pledges about Brexit. And I said in 2017 I would do everything possible to get Brexit done, to respect the result of the 2016 referendum, which is why I voted to keep no deal on the table, which is why I voted against a customs union, which is why I voted against a second referendum, which is why I voted against any delay. We must accept Boris's deal, get Brexit done. If we get a Conservative majority, we'll be able to get Brexit done by the end of January. Now, those who also know me know that my other passion in politics is apprenticeships and education. I've organised 8 jobs and apprenticeships fairs in our town for thousands of people, many of them who've got successful jobs and apprenticeships afterwards. I've campaigned hard and challenged my own government, working with Labour MPs to try and get more education funding for our schools. And I'm glad we're going to get 14 billion extra education funding over the next 3 years. I campaigned and worked hard to secure multi-million-pound investments in Harlow College with our advanced manufacturing centre, so we in Harlow can be the skills capital of the east of England. I visited our college over 70 times because of my passion for education and skills. 15,000 jobs created since 2010, 981 new businesses, 6,000 apprentices in our town since 2010, something that we should be proud of. And I've worked to build an even better Harlow with Public Health England, hundreds and hundreds of jobs potentially available to our young people, £600 million of government investment. We've had 2,000 homes built in our town, 304 affordable homes. I made a pledge to to do everything I could to cut the cost of living. And I pressured the government to maintain the fuel duty free, saving every motorist £10 every time they fill up the tank. I campaigned for a living wage. We have a national living wage. I campaigned for lower taxes for lower earners. So I'm a politician that keeps their promises, that delivers on what I say I was going to do for the people of Harlow. And of course there is a lot to do, and of course there are big problems that we face in our town on regeneration of our town centre. But I ask you to consider your vote for me this evening, to protect our NHS and get our new hospital, to get Brexit done, to build an even better Harlow and continue to cut the cost of living. All those who know me know I work hard for Harlow, I love my community, I live here for many years. And I just ask for another chance to work hard for Harlow and represent you all as your MP.
Thank you, Robert. And finally... the Labour Party.
Thank you for hosting tonight, Vic, and also to the two mics. I love this school, it's fantastic, so I feel very happy to be here. Harlow is a fantastic town, and I feel incredibly lucky to call it my home. It was designed by a pioneering architect, Frederick Gibbard, and it's dotted with Henry Moore sculptures amongst green wedges. But most importantly, it's built by the people that live here. Working class people like my granddad, the plumber that moved from East London after the war and worked with hundreds of others to build this wonderful town that thousands of us now call home. I grew up in Harlow. I went to the schools here, I met my husband here, and I recently started my family here. We have our new baby, Frank, who's only 10 months old. Too often, MPs are parachuted in from other areas with no real understanding of the constituency that they seek to represent. Career politicians. And I believe, and I truly believe, that people are looking for something different, for someone to represent them who is a bit more like them. And I can honestly say that I believe that I am that person. I believe that the people in Harlow are looking for somebody just like them. So, for far too long, this government has been, and supported by our MP, has been obsessed with cutting our vital services. You name it, we have lost it. We have lost Sure Start centres, play schemes, youth services, police, funding for our schools, bus services, doctors' surgeries, affordable housing, industry, real jobs. It can't get much worse than this. But what Labour is offering is aspirational, and it will transform Harlow and the villages for the better. As your MP, I will push for affordable, decent council housing fit for the 21st century with the infrastructure to go with it. A Sure Start centre for every community, youth services, properly funded schools. We will scrap tuition fees, a national care service to give people dignity as they grow older. And yes, we will allow councils to run their own bus services so that they are run for the people rather than for profit. And a proper nationalised health service. Forget the privatisation, okay, that we've seen. A proper nationalised health service. We will transform the economy through investment in technology, infrastructure and people. Transforming energy systems from fossil fuels to renewable clean energies. Creating green jobs in every town and city across the country whilst tackling climate change. And I promise you that I will fight my hardest to ensure that those decent jobs are coming to Harlow and the villages. And it may sound ambitious, but Harlow and the villages deserve nothing less. So, on December the 12th, I promise you, if you vote for me, I will be a true, authentic voice for the people of Harlow and the villages in Westminster. Thank you.
You are here. Do you have any questions, sir, or should we jump to read it out for you?
I'm happy to read it. Many people will know in the room that I was the leader of the Vote Leave campaign in 2016 in Harlow, in which over 68% and nationally a majority of 1.2 million people voted to leave. I'd like to know how each of the candidates and their parties would deliver on that democratic decision.
Laura, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think we all know that Brexit has been a completely divisive issue, and unfortunately it has taken 3.5 years. The Conservatives have got through, 3 leaders. Labour have really tried to negotiate a deal that actually works for working class people like the people of Harlow. And it is incredibly difficult. I speak to people on the doorstep in Harlow and they just want to get Brexit done. And I understand that. I myself voted to leave the EU. But what I did not vote for is this terrible Brexit deal that Boris Johnson is offering us. And it doesn't do anything for working communities like Harlow. And we all know that. And the reason why people are voting for it is because they just want to get it done. But I'm sorry, that is not the answer. It really isn't. So the Labour Party have got they're in a really difficult situation. They're the only party that are actually trying to unite both sides. So you voted leave or remain, it's not about that. It's about the haves and the have-nots. Yeah. It's about those that struggle. And yes, 8.5% of the people in Harlow voted to leave. Yeah, they're frustrated, but we need to get a deal that actually protects working class communities. And that is what Labour is offering. Not this rubbish deal that the Tories are offering, a good deal for working people, and that's what I believe in, and that's what I support.
Thank you. Charlotte, your party is just offering a definite, another referendum and nothing else, is that true?
No, our party is saying that we will revoke Article 50 and stay in Europe. And a large part of the reason for that is to protect working people, because we believe that coming out of Europe will do terrible damage to the British economy. And also we've seen with Jacob Rees-Mogg and people like that, the sort of economy they want to move Britain to after Brexit is like a Singapore next to Europe, with low workers' rights, low pay. You look at a country like America, who we will be competing with outside of Europe. They have 2 weeks holiday. That's all you're entitled to in America. Still, you're only entitled to about 6 weeks maternity leave. These are the sorts of economies we will be competing with if we leave the EU. Inside the EU, we are working with a large enough bloc that we can make sure that there are workers' rights and protections and environmental protections as well. So we believe that working in Europe, we're much stronger, we're much better able to help working people and make sure that we have rights across the board. And the other thing I hear is we want to get it over with. Dream on, dream on. If Boris Johnson really does take us out in January and then has a year of, at least a year, he says just a year, of negotiating with Europe what our deal will be, what our trade arrangements will be with Europe, our major trading party just across the channel from us. He's going to spend, he says, just a year. Well, I'll be surprised if he does it in a year, but let's accept that he can do it in a year. There's then the 40 other countries with whom the EU already has trading arrangements, so with whom we already have trading arrangements through the EU, we'll have to renegotiate those. We'll also have to be fighting something from the World Trade Organization, because China and other countries within the World Trade Organization are taking us to that court, because they say that the deal that we in Europe are suggesting about how their trade deals are split between us and Europe is not fair. So we'll be fighting a legal action there. It'll go on for years and years and years of uncertainty, and with businesses struggling, businesses not investing, people losing jobs, people losing job security, people losing their rights. And so we believe that we should stop Brexit and get on with running this country for people so that they have a decent standard of living, which we think you get through the EU and not outside of the EU.
First-hand has sat through 3 years of debate after debate after debate. Everybody's sick to the teeth of the whole thing. Do you really think people knew what the process was when they ticked that box, yay or nay, back in?
Well, it seems incredible to me, absolutely incredible, that the people voted to leave in 2016. In Harlow, 68% voted to leave, and 3 years on, we still haven't left because it's been blocked by arch Remainers who won't accept a democratic result. The Labour Party, who actually voted for Article 50 a few years ago, honourably, now say they want a second referendum with Remain versus Remain on the ballot paper. So giving people no choice about workers' rights. Well, why can't we in this country decide what workers' rights are? Why do we need to give it to foreign powers to let decide what the workers' rights are? Voted to leave. They waited for long enough. They said that Boris wouldn't get a deal. He got a deal, which is a good It's time to get Brexit done. And as far as the Liberal Democrats are concerned, their party is called Liberal Democrats, and yet they want to deny a democratic vote which was taken place in 2016. People voted for a referendum, let's get on and deliver it, and then you can worry about either having a second referendum under Labour or going to the people with a revoking and ignoring that referendum result. Let's get Brexit done.
Dylan, are you here? What's your question, sir?
What will candidates do to improve NHS services in Harlow?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
So, I'm really looking at what will candidates do to improve NHS services here in Harlow? Rob, would you like to say that first?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. I mentioned that we are going to get a new hospital for Harlow, one of only 6 to be built in the country in the first phase by the government. I worked very hard, the hospital worked very hard, the incredible staff at the hospital worked very hard to get that done. I also paid tribute to the leader of Harlow Council, the Labour Council, on the different side, Mark Ingle, who also worked incredibly hard to get that hospital done with me. So thank you for that, Mark. So that is on top of a national increased expenditure on the National Health Service of £34 billion by 2023. £34 billion extra on the National Health Service. I'm proud that we've had 90 new nurses, 88 new doctors in Princess Alexandra Hospital. We've got new scanners. We've got millions of pounds for additional bed capacity, 2 million investment for the busy winter period, which we had last year. 3.3 million to construct the Charnley ward in 4 months. So of course there are difficulties with the NHS, but this government is investing in Harlow. We should be proud that we're getting a new hospital, proud that our town is one of 6 in the country, proud that we're getting more doctors and nurses, and proud of the investment that the government is putting in.
The thing is, the Tories can throw figures, but there's a big problem within the NHS at the moment, and that is that it is being absolutely decimated. And so the likes of Virgin, Richard Branson made £8 million last year in profit, and you just think, hang on, what is that about? This is supposed to be about patients and not about profits. So yeah, we are promising more funding, so we're promising an extra £26 billion, but actually we're going to reverse the privatisation in the NHS, and that's what we need. We are short of 40,000 nurses. So we will reinstate nursing bursaries. A million more doctor's appointments, because actually that comes up on the doorstep all the time. When I speak to people, they say, I cannot get a doctor's appointment. I call up, I'm on hold, and these are real problems. So we'll be employing more GPs as well. So what it actually comes down to really is that NHS under Labour will serve patients rather than profits, and I'm really
So unusually, I think finally everyone agrees that the NHS does need more money, so hopefully that would happen. And as Liberal Democrats, we certainly would put more money into the NHS. New hospitals are great and they're important, but it's the staff in those hospitals, it's the GPs who prevent us having to go to hospital in the first place by looking after us. It's our general health, making sure that there's good education, good support for people on how we keep ourselves healthy. Make sure there are plenty of opportunities for exercise and healthy eating and good quality housing. Poor quality housing has a real impact on people's health. So if we give people good quality housing, they'll be healthier. They won't need the NHS as much as they currently do. But again, this is one area where I think Brexit is hugely, hugely threatening to our NHS. First and foremost, a lot of the staff in our NHS come from Europe. And they come because they have free movement, they know they can live here, they know they can vote here in local elections, they know they can bring their families here, they know if they meet someone here and fall in love with them, they can stay here, or that person can go to their country with them because there's freedom of movement. And we know that the NHS has lost a lot of staff who have returned to their country in Europe because they no longer feel welcome in this country after Brexit. And then the other big worry I have is however much more money we put into the NHS, if that ends up going out of the NHS in extra prices for medicines, then we will have achieved nothing except to put money into the hands of Big Pharma. And we know, because he has tweeted about it incessantly, that Donald Trump is extremely keen to see us have what, at the beck and call of Donald Trump, and that will be hugely, hugely damaging to our NHS.
Thank you, Charlotte. Neil, do you have a question?
I do. How genuinely aware are all candidates of the impact that large numbers of very vulnerable families moving out from London into the town has had on local infrastructure such as schools and hospitals, and what are you actually going to do to mitigate against that in the future?
Laura, would you like to make that question?
Yeah. Thank you for that, Neil. It is a huge problem. I've met with quite a few families living in Terminus House, and they're really struggling. I mean, I met with one mother, and she had 3 adult sons living with her. And in the daytime, they move their mattresses into the corridor because they don't have the space. Lots of people are really suffering through stress and depression. I spoke to another head teacher of a primary school in Harlow, and some of her students were living out on industrial estates, I think around Templefields. And she said that the biggest reason for poor attendance at her school was because these children were living really in the middle of nowhere with no infrastructure and no bus service to get them to school. So actually, the children just miss out. So I find it absolutely heartbreaking, to be honest, because I hear from lots of people who aren't quite aware of actually how bad the situation is, that these people come from outside of Harlow and they're getting housed and they're bringing their problems with them. But these are really vulnerable people, and they are away from their support systems as well. So we need to be mindful of that. The legislation for permitted developments, it's conservative legislation. In 2013, I think there was changes made there, and it was under Liberal Democrats as well. We would reverse that legislation, so we would. will no longer exist under a Labour government. We want proper housing for people, decent housing, not old office blocks that have been turned into units. I feel really embarrassed for our town that we have that, and unfortunately it is down to the Conservative government. So,
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Neil, for that question on permitted development rights. It is an incredibly important question. The first thing I would say is that this legislation was actually brought through in the Parliament unanimously, and not one party opposed that legislation. There was no vote on it. The reason why there was no vote on it was because people thought that actually we do need extra housing. It was a good idea to build office accommodation that wasn't being used properly for extra houses. And actually, if you look at the old Pearson building, for example, that is a lot of that is under permitted development rights, and that is quality housing. Now, the next thing I would say is the big problem we've had, and if you look at all the freedom of information requests that I have done, is that a vast majority of the people there are London Labour councils who are socially cleansing their own vulnerable residents. There was no vote on it. There was never ever any vote on it.
But you didn't.
No, it was not opposed by any party. No one imagined.
Can you just let the candidate answer the next first?
They don't want to hear the truth. They don't like the fact that Labour councils are sending their vulnerable families to Harlow because they live in minimum areas. Yes, it's true. It is absolutely true. Now, the next thing about it is that what I don't understand, and I've met with residents countless times who are suffering, particularly in Terminus House, and I've met with the landlords and had a letter from them, is they offered those houses to Harlow Council, all of the blocks in that Terminus House and other areas, to Harlow Council. I don't know why Harlow Council didn't accept that offer. I was also told by somebody senior in Harlow Council that Terminus House was offered to Harlow Council for just £1. It was just £1. And what I think there needs to be is an independent investigation as to what happened with Terminus House, why this wasn't quality building, quality houses in Terminus House, quality buildings, and we should work together, all parties, to try and solve this problem. But the first thing is to stop Labour councils sending their residents from their areas in London to Harlow. Because, and that is why I've met with the government, with the leader of the council, who's reviewing how permitted development legislation works. We need to have quality housing. It has gone wrong in parts, and I'm doing my best to try and stop it.
I find it quite shocking, and I agree, shameful, how we're expecting these families to live. And it is just because the current government doesn't have the political will to do something about it. All we need to do is make sure that local authorities are given adequate funding and asked to build proper council housing to at least a minimum standard, and that minimum standard should include things about the amount of space and insulation and solar energy and things like that. And they should be told they must build it at least to those minimum standards, and ideally to better standards, and they should be given the money, and we should be looking to house these people. As I said at the beginning, we did that after the war. We were in debt up to our eyeballs. We couldn't feed people properly, we couldn't clothe people properly, but we found the will and the way and the money to build decent, good quality houses with lots of green space and sculpture. We can do it again, we must do it again, and that's why the Liberal Democrats are absolutely determined to massively increase the amount of council housing that gets built. Because council housing gives families secure homes at a rent they can afford. It allows those people to bring up those families, become part of the community, and to really make a proper life and know that they're secure and they're safe and they can afford the rent. And the fact that we haven't done that for decades, and frankly it isn't just the Tories, the Labour government didn't build much council housing either. The fact that we haven't done it for decades is truly shameful, and there are people now living in Terminus House in terrible conditions because we as a nation have not got round to building the housing of the quality that we need, and Liberal Democrats in government absolutely would do that.
Thank you very much. I'll change the subject to education. I believe Vic has a question, please.
Thank you. Firstly to Rob, we are delighted that the TV account has been pledged by Boris Johnson. I'm sure you're aware that's a 7.4% increase in our funding for the Institute of Financial Studies, which is almost everything that's been cut since 2010. And again, that's 7.4%, which we're delighted about, but it isn't an investment in our children, it's a return to where we were under the Labour government, I have to say. There is a view of academisation which is quite different amongst the candidates and the parties. Obviously, the Conservative Party would like to continue academisation and expand it. Labour has decided to unpick it. I'm actually not certain what the Lib Dems' view is on academisation. Can somebody let us know, can you all let us know what the party's view is of having communities make decisions about their schools rather than central government?
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you for your Vic, and also thank you for the work that you've done to champion school issues and school funding around the country. And you know, because you've come to Westminster, and I hope you're able to acknowledge that I have stuck my head above the parapet and challenged the government. I initiated, as a chairman of the Education Select Committee, I initiated a report into school and college funding to try and get more funding for our schools. And I've done everything possible. So yes, you're right in what you say. It doesn't mean that it reverses some of the difficulties and the tough decisions that have been made over the past few years. Tough decisions, I might say, when you and I might disagree, because the economy was in a very difficult and desperate strait, and now the money's come back. We're able to spend the money in the way on our public services in the way that we want to, because you don't win one vote by cutting public services. You don't win one vote by making it tough for brilliant head teachers like you to do your job. The government made these tough decisions, but now the deficit has got under control, just 1.1% of GDP. We're able to spend that money. It's why we're able to spend 14 billion extra on schools and an extra 780 million pounds on children with special educational needs. Again, something that I have campaigned against. In terms of academies, I've seen the work that you have done on academies and other academies across our town, and it's pretty impressive. I'm very supportive of academies. I do think that the Academy Trust should be investigated by Ofsted, which they aren't at the moment. I know the schools are, but not the trust itself. And I think the more autonomy for head teachers, the better. And I think the way that the academies in Harlow have transformed the life chances of our children, this one being a great example over the past few years, I think is a tribute to you as a teacher and your staff, but also a tribute to the academy process.
Well, clearly education is hugely important. We all need to be educated so that we can read novels, understand what's going on around us, and get good jobs. So education is absolutely critical to people's lives, and it is shocking that we have underfunded our education for a very long time now. And 14 billion, yes, as you say, it just about makes up for the cuts that they've had. But actually, they need more than that. And we would invest more in schools, and we'd like to see many more teachers. We'd like initially to get 20,000 more teachers, because obviously it's teachers and teaching assistants who give our children the education that they need. Where do the Lib Dems stand on academies? The Labour Party introduced them. The Tory Party has taken them up with alacrity and made it almost compulsory for schools to become academies. Not quite, but very nearly. And I don't think it has been a good thing. However, there is an awful lot that needs to be done in education. As I say, we need to put more money into it, we need to get more teachers, we need to address the appalling state of special needs, because the effort that you have to go to now as a school to get a child the extra resources they need when they have special needs is just beyond belief. If a child has special needs, it should be really straightforward for the school to get the extra resources that that child needs. It helps that child, it helps the class, it helps the school, it helps everyone, and it should be much, much easier. And because there is so much that needs to be done at a very, very basic level, we wouldn't start to unpick academies at this stage, even though it's not something we would ever have done. But what we do want to do is make sure that a lot more power is moved back to the local education authority so that they can make sure, for example, that there are enough schools for the population. Because at the moment, local authorities themselves are not allowed to build new schools. They have to find an academy who's willing to do it. How ridiculous is that? It should be local authorities who understand what the need is in their local area and can address that need themselves. So we would put more power back into local authorities. We wouldn't have created academies in the first place, but we believe there are a lot more urgent priorities in education to tackle than to actually start unpicking academies now.
Thank you, Paul.
I know that Vic, you and I have had a conversation about this, and I know that you've done such great work, and I think everyone really understands that in Harlow. It is Labour Party policy to end academisation of schools. Now, my problem is that how is it fair that we have a chief executive of an academy in Harlow that earns more than £150,000 per year, but yet I've been on the school gates for the past week and looking at the statistics and looking at the money that is being cut from our schools, and these are academies, and you think, how does that make sense, and how is that fair? So the Labour Party is all about putting money into the classrooms, you know, making our classroom sizes smaller, providing the materials that teachers need. You know that I've spoken to a teacher in this town that actually provides materials for their class because they are that skint. And it is absolutely shameful. And it's no coincidence that when the Conservatives were in power, teachers joining the profession drops dramatically, and when Labour are in government, teachers join, and you can see those numbers rise dramatically as well. So I understand, Vic, your concerns about, you know, reversing academisation, but that is Labour Party policy, and I believe in the long run that it probably will be the right thing to do.
Next year we're going to raise your mic.
The 2019 Rich List and the Sunday Times says that Britain's 1,000 richest individuals and families hold a record wealth of £771.3 billion. That was up 47.8 billion in a year. Yet according to a recent report on poverty called State of Hunger 2019, the average weekly income for people at food banks is only £50 after paying rent, and almost 3/4 of people at food banks live in households affected by ill health and disability. Does the panel find this acceptable in 21st century Britain?
Thank you. It's an important question because there is social injustice in our society, which is why that I'm glad that the government have taken a lot of measures to deal with tax avoidance, raising up to £200 billion from the rich. It's why the richest 1% pay something like 27% of all income tax. It's why that the tax take, for most of the years under Gordon Brown, the people who are on higher incomes, we are paying more tax than they were under the Gordon Brown, apart from the last few months of the Labour government. And in terms of helping those who struggle, it's why we introduced the national living wage, which will go up to over £10 by 2024, over £10.50 by 2024. People will be £4,000 a year better off. It's why we cut taxes for lower earners, raising the threshold in which people pay tax up to £12,500. It's why we froze fuel duty, something I campaigned on for a long time. Froze for many years under the previous government, under David Cameron, froze council tax, and why we had the pension triple lock to try and help those people at the bottom end who are struggling the most.
So a straight answer to the question, no, it's not acceptable. It's possible that the Tories may have passed some policies about tax avoidance, but at the same time they've been cutting back on staff at HMRC, so people know they can get away with it, whatever the law says. They are not really addressing it. If they were really addressing it, and things like the minimum wage, or what they now call the living wage, they've just taken the name, they haven't actually put it at a living wage figure, but they don't even check that people are getting paid that. It's up to people to complain, and then maybe HMRC will go out to look. If you were serious about the minimum wage, you would have teams of people in HMRC whose job was to check and go and see if companies were paying minimum wage and take action against them if they weren't. And one of the biggest mistakes was freezing benefits. Now, benefits, by their definition, are paid to people to help them manage when they don't have sufficient income. They are designed to be enough to live on, and frankly, barely enough to live on. So if you freeze them, every time inflation rises, those people have not enough to live on. And the following year, even less than enough to live on. And the year after that, even less again to live on. So you have to make sure, yes, the triple lock on pensions, that's fine, but it isn't just pensioners who are poor in this country. It's now often not even unemployed people, it's people who are working extremely hard, sometimes in more than one job, and yet because they barely get the minimum wage, they can't afford to live. And so they end up going to food banks and things. Now, I'm hugely glad the food banks are there, and I'm really grateful to the volunteers who staff those food banks, but we shouldn't need them. It is utterly shameful. People should not need to be going to food banks.
Laura?
Yeah, I mean, is it right that the world's richest 26 people own as much as the world's poorest 50%? I mean, it's just absolutely repulsive, you know. We're the 5th richest economy in the world, and we are seeing, yes, working people using food banks, people living on the streets. It is utterly shameful. But this government has done absolutely nothing for the poorest people in society, nothing for the families where you've got both parents working. They're still struggling. Look at the Googles and the Amazons. What about them? Are they paying tax? No, they're not. We need to close the loopholes. We need to close the loopholes. It is absolutely outrageous. It is absolutely outrageous. And so, yeah, absolutely. It is terrible that you've got these billionaires. And actually, yeah, the last 10 years since the international financial crisis, the number of billionaires has actually doubled. It's shameful.
Come back to you, Robert. You were this afternoon that Boris Johnson went back on his pledge about corporation tax, the planned cut. He's keeping it as it is. What's your thoughts on what he's done this afternoon?
What I understand is that he said he's not going to cut corporation tax and spend that money on the NHS instead. And of course, I welcome that. It's worth also remembering that when you cut taxes for business, because most businesses in the country pay for corporation tax, they then are able to employ more people, invest in machinery, invest in capital, and we actually create more jobs, which is why we've had a
Alan Leverett here, please.
I think I've got a loud enough voice, I think. Harlow Council has had to return to the government capital receipts for the right to buy of approximately £3 million due to the inability to match the funding for building new council homes, which is a government requirement for them to retain these receipts. Not everyone has the ability or wants to own their own property, as the word affordable housing is not a reality in Harlow. Will the candidate suggest ways that the council can build suitable social housing for those who are on the housing register, and more importantly, the strategies to obtain such funding for that purpose?
Well, clearly councils should be able to keep the capital receipts from selling council houses and should be required to spend that on building new council houses. But fundamentally, it's for central government to provide much more money to local government so they can build more council houses. And Lib Dems are committed to doing that. We've said we'll build 100,000 new council houses a year. We're also committed to looking at the existing housing stock. So if you look around, there are quite a lot of houses in Harlow that clearly were built in the 60s when the standards of insulation were very poor. So the people living in those houses are either paying a lot for their heating or their cold, or probably, frankly, both. So we would also be looking at the existing housing stock and making sure that we brought that up to a good standard of insulation so they were comfortable homes that people could afford to heat and weren't going to be damaging the environment in heating them. But fundamentally, local government has to, central government has to take a lot of the things away from local government. It requires them to sell houses under certain circumstances. It then restricts how they can use that money to build more houses. It makes it difficult for them to borrow money because they potentially have to sell those houses. So you can only borrow money if you know you're going to have the rental stream to repay that. If you know that central government might come along and say you've got to sell that, you've got to sell it for less than value, then how do you pay that debt? So central government has got to change the law that it imposes on local government to enable them to build more council houses, and it's got to provide the money, whether that's in the form of a grant or a loan. It can be a loan because, as I say, if they're going to get the rental income, they can repay that. But it absolutely has to provide the money because local authorities, sadly, do not have the resources to find enough money to build enough houses quickly enough. We've done it before, as I've said, we did it after the war. We can do it, we just have to be determined to do it.
Laura.
The Labour government, they were the ones that started to build council housing. Our local Harlow Labour Council is building council housing, but unfortunately they're having to think outside the box and create a separate company, because otherwise they don't know if they're going to have to then sell these homes at a discount a few years down the line. The problem is they're not getting the funding from central government. What we are proposing is a mass building of social council housing, and we're talking about 1 million council houses, you know, truly affordable, decent, fit for the future, adaptable, building on our brownfield sites with the infrastructure, with the landscaping, with the bus services, the community hubs, council housing fit for the future, not what we've got at the moment, not the terminus house permitted developments, but we're talking about something fit for the future, and we can do it. We did it before, yes, and we can absolutely do it again. Look at what they're doing in Vienna. Look at what they're creating and what they're building out there. It is aspirational. It is exciting. They have swimming pools on the rooftops. I mean, this is in our reach. It is, but it's amazing, but it is in our reach, and we can do it. But we need a government that's willing to do it. And I'm sorry, but the Labour government is the only government that is willing to build proper council housing.
Thank you. Question from Gary Roberts, please. Gary, where are you? Oh, sorry, did I not ask you? Sorry, did I miss you out? I'm so sorry. Sorry, Robert. Apologies.
Thank you for that. Sadly, under the last Labour government, virtually not one council house was built across the country, so we've had to play quite a big catch-up, and I thank you, Alan, for your question. What the government have done is that every new home built in Harlow, there's been a new homes bonus that's meant millions of pounds going to Harlow Council, which has enabled Harlow Council to build more council homes, which I strongly welcome. We've got 304 more affordable homes in Harlow since 2010. We've got over 2,000 new homes built in Harlow since 2010, and that's something we should be proud of. I'd like more council houses to be built. I think there need to be incentives for housing associations, so that housing associations can build more houses, because social housing can be housing association as well as council housing. We've freed the rules in terms of council borrowing, making it easier for councils to build more housing, and I hope that those will make some important changes and that we will have more housing, social housing for our people.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My question is directed at Mr. Hallow, and it concerns your government over the last 9 years of cut the number of police officers, prison officers and probation officers from the criminal justice system, resulting in a backlog of 32,000 cases in the courts. Are you proud of this achievement? If not, why not?
So, of course, we as a government made some very tough decisions when we got into power, because as the note that was left in the Treasury by the Labour if you ask a question, you want to hear the answer. The problem is you ask a question, you don't want to hear the answer. This is always the problem with the left. They just don't want to hear the answer. The biggest deficit since the Second World War. Again, you don't want to hear the answer. You just want to shout and heckle. Not a great example for the students who are in the back of the room. There was we were paying something like 140 million a day just to pay off the debt, the interest off the national debt, the interest, not even the debt itself. So the government made some very difficult decisions, which again, you don't win, as I said to Vic Goddard earlier, you don't win one vote by saying that you're going to take tough decisions on public services. What vote do you win? What member of the public wants not to have spending on public services? What member of the public? None. You don't win one vote. We had to do it because we had to control our deficit, get the debt down, which we have done. And because of that, we are going to be spending 20,000. We will be spending enough money to get 20,000 more police on our streets. We're going to have 500 extra police across Essex, as the police commissioner himself has said by 2021. You can't spend money that you don't have. And now that the money has come in again, now we've got rid of our deficit, now our debt is under control, we're able to spend on those vital public services.
Is Ross Deer here, please? Ross Deer.
Have we heard them all?
Yes, we have. Ross. Ross Deer. We'll come back to it, okay? We'll come back to it.
This is my question. In the context of climate change, what plans do you have to ensure Harlow contributes to reducing its carbon emissions?
What plans for Harlow?
In the context of climate change, what plans do you have to ensure Harlow contributes to reducing its carbon emissions?
Charlotte, would you like to answer that?
So I touched on one of them, which was make sure that all the housing stock in Harlow is brought up to standard for insulation, which will mean that a lot less energy will get used. We also want to look at more solar power and wind power. One of the schemes, I have to admit it's not part of policy, but one of the schemes I'm really excited by is it's a charity, and they use public money to go to a row of houses, which is really works well with council houses because they're in the same ownership, so they get the permissions easily. They go to that row of houses and they completely re-insulate and bring them up to really, really high standards of insulation so that it's easy for them to keep their home warm, it's cheaper for them, it's better for the environment. And then they get local people and they train them so that they're able to install solar energy to those houses, and then those people can then work as solar energy engineers going forward. So schemes like that, I think, would be really exciting. Harlow, of course, has got a lot of green space, which is really good, and so I would expect that we would be able to plant some of the many trees that we want to plant in the Harlow green space. I know you've already got a lot of trees, but one can always have more trees. And then you have to look at public transport and make sure that there's really good quality, reliable, affordable public transport to discourage people from using their cars. You already have really good cycle routes and walking routes, but public transport, I think, is a key. It's at the moment, it's just very expensive for people, and you need to bring the cost down, and that's been the problem. I'm probably the oldest person on the panel, and I remember when Margaret Thatcher effectively privatised the buses, because most local councils ran their own buses, and there were really good services that ran 7 days a week, including Christmas Day, and they ran at night, and they were affordable, and they were reliable, and they cross-subsidised from the routes that made a profit to the routes that made a loss. And then she privatised them, and they weren't allowed to cross-subsidise, and you've seen a huge decline in bus services since then, because local authorities have to put so much money into subsidising the routes that don't make a profit, that over time, more and more, they just drop those routes because they can't afford to do it. So we have to change the rules so that Harlow Council can again run the bus service and make sure that they run it as a community service that is there for everyone, reliable and affordable, get us out of our cars, because cars are hugely damaging to the environment. Most of us use them because it's the best alternative. We need to make sure that public transport is the best alternative so that we're not using cars.
Thank you.
So our local council, they have declared a climate emergency. And it was Labour that proposed a motion to declare a formal climate emergency as well. Locally, yes, we need a good public transport. Our buses are privatised and they don't run efficiently. Sometimes they don't run at all. They're expensive, and yes, that's why people are using cars. Now, I've been working with different groups of people to talk about the potential of a green metro link that will actually run through Harlow and link Harlow to Epping Tube Station, and there's a lot of excitement about that. Our cycle tracks are fantastic. I think it's the biggest cycle network in the whole UK, but it isn't maintained properly. So Conservative-controlled Essex County Council are just neglecting it. It's dangerous, it's unsafe, and quite frankly, it's such a shame because there are so many people that actually want to get on their bikes and use those cycle tracks, but they don't because of that reason. We have also just announced a really exciting policy called Warm Homes for All. And what's involved in that is there will be grants given to low-income households and loans with very low interest rates to homes as well, to make sure that their homes are energy efficient. So it will bring down the bills, but also it's good for the environment too. The Labour Party has just passed a motion at conference, and it's called the Green New Deal, and it is about investing in green, renewable jobs, 400,000 of them as a minimum for the whole of the UK. I've already been speaking to the Labour leadership about getting some of those jobs here in Harlow, so that's something I'm really excited about. But you're talking, it's a major project, but it's exciting and it's totally doable.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. We need to cherish our environments, and I'm glad that the Conservative Council, along with Labour, passed this motion unanimously to protect our environment. We've reduced emissions by 42%. We've got a target of net zero carbon emissions by 2050, to have mostly moved to electric cars by 2030. We've introduced the plastic bag levy that's made a big difference on the amount of plastic, a conservative measure. The ban on plastic straws, the banning of microbeads, £500 million to invest, £500 million in the Blue Planet Fund to invest in our oceans, to protect our oceans. We need to cherish our environment. There's a lot more that we can do, and we can do individually. And if I could just say, it isn't just about these big macro measures from the government or whatever party. It's also what we can do ourselves. And environmentalism must begin at home. And when I walk past the A414, and you see all the litter that people throw away, and you see all the plastic that every single one of us is buying or drinking in our coffee cups, each of us can make a contribution. And one of the most wonderful things that I ever could do is when we go on holiday to Yorkshire, I spend time in tree parks, because the environment isn't just good for the energy, it isn't just good for the planet, but it's also good for our well-being. Cherishing our environment does much for our mental health and well-being, as much of the many other wonderful things that it does. And I'm really pleased that we've got a new target of planting 30 million trees, and I hope we do that, because that not only will offset carbon emissions hugely, but it will also give us a lot of well-being and make our country a more beautiful place to live.
Thank you. Cuts to the police force, and I must also say the fire service as well, that the fire service in Essex has been halved over the last 15 years. So I didn't give you two the opportunity, so Laura, would you like to answer the question about the cuts to the police and prison officers and fire service and many in the public service?
So, we've lost 23,000 police, so the Conservatives have cut 23,000 police. So now they're going to put 20,000 police on the streets. So we're actually losing 3,000. And this has been hugely damaging to towns like Harlow. Across Essex, we've lost 800 police. I mean, Harlow Council, this doesn't even fall on, it's not their responsibility, but things are so desperate that they've actually had to employ 3 PCSOs out of their own budget, because antisocial behaviour is so bad in Harlow. So the 23,000 is just not enough. The fire services, I've spoken to, they are really struggling. I think they've gone in Harlow from 18 on a watch to 12. They said it's incredibly dangerous, and they're really concerned about that. And they are backing Labour Party policy. The FBU have endorsed me, so I welcome that. But absolutely, it's frightening, and the 23,000, the 20,000 is just not enough. Yeah.
Thank you, Lord.
Part of the question was also about cuts to our court services, and justice delayed is definitely justice denied. And it's bad for the person who's accused, who is innocent until proved guilty, but actually they really need to have their court case so that it's clear. And it's very definitely bad for the victim, especially if you're a victim of violent crime and you have to wait years sometimes, and then you're going to have to relive and give the evidence about that crime. It's not acceptable, and we need to make sure that we change that. But we need to focus more on how we prevent crime, and that's part of why you miss the Bobby on the beat, because they're the eyes and ears. They see what's going on and they can get involved, and at an early stage, as you say, at the antisocial behaviour stage, and nip it in the bud. But you also need to look at other things to make sure that we have more opportunities for people to keep them away from ever getting near crime and antisocial behaviour. So more youth services, better crime prevention. And it takes some money, but it also takes a will and an understanding that these things are part of people's quality of life. If you are afraid that when you go to certain parts of town, you might suffer from criminal activity and maybe even violence, then that is going to impact how you live. So we have to put the money into making sure that all of us feel safe in our community.
Thank you very much. David Carter. I sit at the front.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, what is your position on the free movement of people and of controlling immigration?
Robert, would you like to say that first, please?
Thank you, David, for our question. Well, the important thing is that we have fair immigration that is fair to the taxpayer. And the second important thing is that when we leave the EU, we will be able to decide who comes into this country and who doesn't. And I think that is important, that we take control over our own borders and we make the decision. We have said that once we leave the European Union, we will take back control of our borders and we will control freedom of movement. Diane Abbott has said she wants to extend freedom of movement, as has John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor. We've also said that we will introduce an Australian point system, so we'll attract our brightest and our best. That will be advised by the Independent Migration Advisory Committee that will decide what doctors we need, what nurses we need, what technicians, what entrepreneurs we need. And finally, it is wrong that people can come here and just claim welfare benefits pretty quickly. What, as the government have said over the past few days, the Home Secretary, is that people will have to be here a minimum of 5 years to claim welfare benefits, and will have to pay a surcharge of £625. There's nothing racist about that, because why shouldn't people who have not paid their taxes? We have paid our taxes to get our services. We have paid our taxes to get our services. It would be fair that people who come here pay their taxes and then get the welfare and the NHS services.
Control of our borders. I flew in from Spain on Wednesday night, and there was a man there who wouldn't let me pass his barrier unless I showed him my passport. So that is a problem. I can't come in unless I've got a passport. So what do you mean by taking back control of our borders?
I don't know what happened to you in your individual case, but what I mean by taking back control of our borders is that when we leave the European Union, we as a country will decide who comes here and who doesn't. There won't be
chair.
So our manifesto is not out yet, so it will be out on Thursday. So our policy in the 2017 manifesto is that when we leave the EU, that free movement of people will come to an end, and it will be based on a fair immigration points system. But the manifesto is not out yet, Robert, so we can't quite comment on that. What we won't do is scapegoat migrants, and I saw paid for advert on Facebook. Day one, the general election was called, and what did you do? You put out an advert that was claiming false accusations on the Labour Party, and the reason why you
we quoted John McDonnell directly.
The reason why you did it was because you thought it was going to get
Answer the question.
I will answer the question.
You're not answering.
Please let her answer.
Is the Labour Party will not scapegoat migrants, and that is what I am saying. And we are working on a fair immigration policy that will benefit all. But you're trying to be very clever here, Robert, but it's very, very dangerous doing this. Very, very dangerous. Language like take back control. It's terrible, really. It's shameful.
What's your policy on immigration?
It's interesting that Robert talks about. It's interesting that Robert talks about wanting a fair immigration system. I think one of the moments when I felt most ashamed to be British was watching elderly people who had come over from the West Indies. Yes. Paid taxes all their lives. Fought for us in the war, and now we're turning around and telling them that they've got to go home. They are home. This is where they live. So I would very much like the Lib Dems want to stop Brexit. That means that we will retain free movement with Europe. And that cuts both ways. Yes, Europeans come over here and work, and they contribute to our society, and they make Britain a better place to live in. But British people go over to Europe to work and to raise families and so forth. So it cuts both ways. And I feel deeply saddened that I am currently a British European citizen. So there are 28 countries of which I am a citizen, and I can go to any one of those 28 countries and work and live and love there. And if the Tories get their way, I will just be a British citizen, and I will only be able to live and work in this country. And I won't have colleagues around me at work who've come from other parts of the world. So what would the Lib Dems do? We think immigration has been really beneficial to this country. It has brought in people, mostly people who emigrate to a country, are people who want to work in that country. They want to make a really good life for themselves. So mostly they really contribute fantastic things to that country. They come here and they work as care workers, looking after our elderly. They work as nurses and doctors. They come and help pick our food in the fields. They come and invent things. They get Nobel Prizes for us when they're at universities and things. They are mostly hugely beneficial to this country. So one of the key things we would do is move responsibility from the Home Office, who clearly are not fit for purpose. They have shown it over and over again with everything. Can you believe Priti Patel apparently blocked bringing home children from the camps in Syria? Apparently she blocked them. Well, bring them home then. Bring them home. Will you bring them home? Will you bring them home?
But that's not true.
Well, okay.
Well, would you like to respond to that, Robert? Very briefly.
Will
Well, that's a complete untruth. It was denied by the Foreign Secretary on Sunday. But what I will say is this. Diane Abbott is the Shadow Home Secretary.
I gave the microphone to you to answer the question. Can you bring those children home?
Okay, right, we'll change the subject.
I hope they will come home. But
Matthew
sorry, can I just finish?
No, you can't.
No, we don't want
To the Department for Business, because they are the people who understand what the needs are of our economy and will make sure that we have a strong and fair immigration policy.
Thank you. Matthew Douglas. You'll have to come to me, so I can't. Can you explain to me? Come to me, I can't come to you, sorry. I just want to make sure you're heard.
Can you explain to me how a man who for 7 years in a row during the height of the armed operations spoke at IRA commemorations for dead IRA terrorists and who in May this year was praised and saluted by Hamas for a statement that he made, the armed militant group. He also calls Hamas and Hezbollah his friends. How would you think to keep our country safe and secure?
That is absolute nonsense. And
We're nearly at the end. Let her reply. Please let the candidate reply.
that is absolute nonsense. The problem is, you need to use your own mind and think yourself, rather than listening to the rubbish newspapers and reading the Daily Mail and the mainstream media. It's absolutely false. Look into Jeremy Corbyn's voting record. Look at his history. He is a man of peace. Whether you like him or not, he is a man of peace. He has He is a man of peace, and so that is it. Do a little bit of reading and then come back to it.
I don't mind whoever.
Don't mention the name Corbyn on the doorsteps, Miss McAlpine, and see what you're supposed to get. They won't listen to you. They're telling you to bring the whole
I'm not going to switch to defend Jeremy Corbyn in any way. I wouldn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn.
I would vote for Joe Spencer.
I don't think he's a good political leader. However, I would make the point that if you are going to have peace in this world, you have to speak to some pretty unsavoury people. John Major spoke to the IRA and he started the process that led to the Good Friday peace deal. So you do have to speak to some very, very unpleasant people, and sometimes you have to make very difficult compromises with those people. We got the Good Friday Agreement, but we had to allow for some things to be left. And so we know that there are people who did terrible things, murdered people, kneecapped people and what have you, who are still walking free. But what we have for now is peace in Northern Ireland, and that is a prize that is always worth working for. And it's another one of the things that really worries me about Brexit, because you're now talking about, you were talking about a border across between the two parts of Ireland, which was going to do terrible damage to the peace agreement, and now you're talking about a border down the Irish Sea, which is also going to do damage to the peace in Ireland. And I cannot believe that anyone is willing to put that at risk, and that seems to me much, much more shameful, to put people's lives at risk just for a political point.
So on Sunday we had the Remembrance Service, a beautiful service in our town. a member of the British Legion, who I won't name, who said he had been a Labour person all his life and he would never vote for Corbyn. And I said to him, why would you never vote? I said to him, I will not name him out of courtesy to him. He said, I would never vote for Corbyn because I served in Northern Ireland and Corbyn went to the funerals and supported the people who murdered my friends. Yes. Exact words to me, on my word of honour. And this man did not read the Daily Mail. He saw that Jeremy Corbyn is a friend of the IRA, he's a friend of Hamas, and he's a friend of Hezbollah, and brought them into the House of Commons. Sadly, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell have been a friend of terrorists. Can
I just ask maybe you two really, is the whole general election now more about the personalities of Corbyn and Johnson and not about the policies of either party? Do people the red tops make too much, the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, Corbyn this, Corbyn that, and not about what the Labour Party do? Conservative politicians attack Corbyn instead of the Labour Party. Would you say that was true at the moment? And equally the other way, half the country think Boris Johnson is an idiot. I'm not asking both parts. It's not about you. The question is it more about personalities?
The good thing is, tonight, the vast majority of questions have been on policy, on the environment, on education, on housing, on crime. Matthew had his right to ask a question why Jeremy Corbyn was a friend of terrorists.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We ask why Boris Johnson is a friend of Russians. Can we ask that? Can we ask that question? Why is Boris Johnson a friend of Russians?
It's Boris Johnson a friend of Russians, exactly. It has unfortunately become about personalities. And people forgetting about the policies, people forgetting what has happened to this town for the past 9 years under the Conservatives. It is an embarrassment, to be honest, Robert. Are you really proud of what you and your government have done to this town? So it has become more about personalities. And I know Jeremy Corbyn, and he is a decent, kind, principled man. It's about our policies. That is what it's about. It's about policies that are actually going to transform working class people's lives, like the people in this room. And you're not going to get that under a Conservative government. Well, you haven't had that after the past 9 years, so you certainly won't get it next.
Thank you very much. We started answering the question about why the people of this town should vote for you. I'd like to do that again, give you another 2 minutes each to respond, and we'd like to do it yes, you can, so yeah, very quickly. Yeah, we're running out of time, I'm afraid.
Questions from the floor?
Well, I'll have mine then.
Yes, as people may know, a civil war is raging in Yemen. It's been going on for 4 years, and it's the greatest humanitarian crisis in the world. 80% of the people of Yemen need humanitarian assistance. 360,000 children under 5 years of age are suffering from acute malnutrition. And this is funded by the British government because bombs actually making Harlow by Wayfield are being dropped.
Don't make bombs.
I made electronics for the bombs. I made electronic circuits for the bombs.
What about the policy?
Both sides in Yemen, are literally opposed to ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So by supporting one side in the war, my question is, has the Conservative government enabled the growth of reactionary terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS by giving military and diplomatic support to the intervention in the civil war in Yemen by Saudi Arabia and its allies?
Sorry, I had a real question. Robert, do you want to answer that?
Very briefly, just to say that, first of all, Raytheon have provided hundreds of jobs in our town for many years, and we should be proud of them, an incredible company. They also spent £25 million in our new enterprise zone, another thing provided by this Conservative government. You track all the employees who would lose their jobs, and they don't make bombs in Harlow. They actually develop things like GPS and other things that we should be proud of, and we should celebrate them. And in terms of terrorism, I think it goes back to our previous, the person who's done more to promote terrorism in this country is Jeremy Corbyn.
This government's foreign policy is absolutely disgusting. Why are they selling arms to Saudi Arabia when they know what they're going to do? It's just about money and lining their pockets and their friends.
Right, I'm running out of time, sir, so...
The war in Yemen is a terrible war, and it's a shocking humanitarian crisis that's folding in front of us, and I think our government has played a very shoddy, to say the least, role in it. Our dealings with Saudi Arabia worry me on so many grounds, not least as a woman, the way they treat women in that country. I really don't think they are good allies, good people, and I don't think we should be giving them arms. And we should be working with the international community to try and resolve what's going on in Yemen, because just too many people, children, women, people who aren't involved in the war, are dying either from the military or indeed just from starvation and disease. And it's just, it's wrong. It's wrong. A British government should be out there in the forefront of the international community, trying to find a peaceful solution to what's going on in Yemen.
I was asked Laura a question specifically by members of Harlow's Jewish community, a community which I share some heritage. How do you personally justify the comments of Mr. Hawksby? Is he still your aide? And what will you do personally to take a stance, a real stance, make a real difference on the irrefutable amount of anti-Semitism in your party that you're part of?
First of all, can we have a bit of respect, please? First of all, what I will say is that the Labour Party is an anti-racist party. I come from a family of long-line anti-racist campaigners. Brett Hawksby wrote that blog in 2015. And he has said himself that if he was to write that blog again today, he would not use those words. He has publicly apologised for using those words. And I believe that it was right that he did that. I don't have an aide. What I have is I work very closely with lots of different people in the Labour Party. And we are a democratic party, but I don't have an aide. I have my own voice and my own views. But what I am saying is that Brett Hawksby apologised for those words, and I think that it is right that he did apologise for those words. What will I do? I can say. Can I just come back to that? So you said, what will I do about in the Labour Party? So anti-Semitism is abhorrent in all sides of society. Whether it's in the Labour Party or in the wider society. There are 6 cases for every 10,000 members in the Labour Party of anti-Semitism, and 1 case is too many. And we have robust procedures to deal with that, and we're dealing with it very fast. But it's not more common in the Labour Party than it is in the wider community. But all anti-Semitism, all racism is wrong, and it needs to be stamped out.
As somebody from a Jewish background whose father came to this country because of persecution, it is incredibly sad to me that anti-Semitism has reached Harlow, which is a kind and tolerant place and has a wonderful synagogue and a wonderful community. It's incredibly sad that Jewish Labour MPs have been hounded out of the Labour Party. People who I met in House of Commons who are very good people. Jewish Labour MPs hounded out of their own party and having to join other parties or step down from Parliament. That is pretty shocking. It's sad that the Labour Party is being investigated by the Equalities and Human Rights Commission for anti-Semitism. It's incredibly sad that Jeremy Corbyn has not supported an anti-Semitic mural, which he's since apologised for, to be fair, but supported that anti-Semitic mural which was done in East London. The scourge of anti-Semitism has hit the Labour Party, and it's really sad for our country, it's really sad for Harlow, and it's incredibly sad that one of the senior people around your campaign is also an anti-Semite and has talked about the final solution.
I think it's deeply depressing, genuinely deeply depressing, that we're having this conversation about one of our political parties clearly having members in it who have been anti-Semitic, and clearly Luciana Berger, when she left the Labour Party, clearly felt that she wasn't safe there, she wasn't comfortable there. That is deeply, deeply depressing. But it's also deeply depressing that you have a Conservative Party who is obviously Islamophobic, and the Windrush. At the end of the day, we are all people, and we should all respect each other and care for each other, and we shouldn't have anti-Semitism, anti-Islam, anti-whatever. We are all people, and we all have a value, and we should value each other and care for each other.
Thank you. I'm sorry, this is the final question we'll
How will your party support small local businesses like mine if you get into government?
Question, how will your party support local business? Let's start with you, Robert.
Thank you. That's an important question. We're going to cut business rates for smaller businesses. We're investing in our high streets. In fact, Harlow is a benefit of a high street fund. That's incredibly important. Harlow is also going to be benefit of up to £25 million to regenerate our town centre and our infrastructure. We cut taxes for business people. We cut the national insurance that businesses have to pay. Again, it's not about putting money in people's pockets, it's about helping businesses invest and being able to employ more people.
Well, you need to look at the tax system. Yes, we need to make sure that we reduce some of the taxes like business rates, but at the same time we also need to look at making sure that the bigger companies, particularly the mail order companies, Amazon and people like that, who currently effectively pay no tax, that they are paying a tax, because everyone in this country is benefiting from the roads, the police, the hospitals, and so everyone should be paying taxes for those. We also need to have, I don't know what your business is, but for many businesses they need well-trained people, so we need good apprenticeship schemes, we need good standard of education, and we need a really good NHS, because if you have staff who are unwell, you want them seen by a doctor and treated as quickly as possible so they're back to work fit and well, rather than you having to pay them sick leave and worry about whether you're going to get in cover. So it's about making sure that our society functions properly, that everybody pays a fair amount of tax, and that we are not as we are at the moment, frankly, we are burdening the people who have physical premises with tax, because that's easy to tax, and we're letting the big boys like Amazon get away with, well, scot-free, and that's not.
So what Labour are going to do is they're actually going to reduce business rates for small businesses. They're also going to support them, because when we've got our living wage coming in from next year actually, so they're going to get extra additional help for that. We're also creating regional banks, so in every community there will be a bank with additional money that is going to be used for small businesses to help them and to support them. And that's also the same for cooperatives as well. So the Labour Party also are announcing a policy. We are going to be introducing hundreds of thousands of apprenticeships as well, which I'm really excited about. So we are the party that really looks after small businesses, and yes, and Charlotte, you're right, we need to clamp down on the big boys like Amazon and Google, and Labour government will do that.
Thank you very much. We really have run out of time. I'm sorry, I cannot take any more questions. I'm going to just ask the three candidates to sum up. You've got 1 minute each. Laura, you were last at the beginning, so would you like to go first? And you have 1 minute to say why we should vote for you.
Okay, so really echoing, I suppose, what I said at the start, that if you want somebody that is going to be on your side, somebody from the town that's grown up here, that is invested in the town, then you need to vote for me. I have real ambition for this town. I want community centres, I want youth centres, I want libraries, community hubs, a proper bus service, proper infrastructure, proper decent jobs, proper well-paid British jobs for Harlow. And I'm really excited about our future, but that can only really happen under a Labour government. So please give me your vote on December 12th.
Thank you.
I've got a confession to you all, because the Labour candidate often highlights this. I'm not a grandchild of Harlow. I'm not even from Harlow. I was from North London. I'm a pilgrim here. I came here 20 years ago to live. It is a place, I came here because Harlow is a place of achievement, of aspiration, of opportunity, and above all, community. And it's true, yes, as the Labour candidate says, that my dad, who came here as a refugee, sent me to an independent school. He worked day and night to send me there. He set up fruit and veg wholesale in the east end of London. And although my family had a shop here for many years, my dad was not from Harlow either. But it's not about where you come from or where your parents choose to send you to school. That is not what the people of Harlow care about. What they care about is how you serve your community, whether you're helping to secure a new hospital or campaigning to cut the cost of living with a fuel duty freeze. It's about raising the ladder of opportunity for everyone, championing education, skills and apprenticeships, as I have done since day one of being elected a Member of Parliament. I ask you to consider me in your vote to build an even better Harlow, to work with the council, with all parties to regenerate our town centre, to make sure our new hospital is right for the residents. Please vote for me. I've delivered on my pledges. I want to continue the hard work for Harlow and the villages.
Thank you very much.
Better than it's had for the last few decades, and I would like you to vote for me so that I can fight for Harlow to make sure that it gets really good quality National Health Service, that it has really high standards of schools, that the environment is made safe and protected for all of us. But mostly vote for me because I will stop Brexit, and I will allow our government then
Rubbish! You'll never stop it! You'll never stop it! We won't let you to
concentrating on never-ending discussions about trade deals with country X and country Y. I don't know about the rest of you, but when Donald Trump rang the LBC radio and said, I want Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson to form a pact. And then a few weeks later, blow me, they have formed a pact.
Just like you lot.
I don't want to be run by America. I want to be part of a community of European nations delivering a really high standard of on the 7th and 12th, and I will ensure that the government moves on to the issues that really matter to the people of Harlow.
Thank you very much. Thank you all to our candidates for showing that time. Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you to Vic and the hospital.